y'all. Thanks so much for joining me, Kelly, aka The Wandering Widow. On this show, we will address the many aspects of life after loss and the journey towards wellness and wholeness through exploration of self, planet, and all the relationships that we make along the way. We're going to do so with a little bit of grit, some grace, and a dose of that dark sense of humor. Hopefully you'll laugh. I'll likely cry. Everything's fine. Hey folks, welcome to the first official podcast of The Wandering Widow. In this episode, I'd like to chat a little bit about how we can support a recently bereaved person. So there are some things, some like canned hallmark phrases, some things that societally and community-wide we tend to allow to just fall out of our mouths in the presence of someone who has recently lost a loved one. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. And there are some that we can maybe shift and change so that they feel a little bit more supportive and kind and validating. So we'll just go through 10 of them. So 10 things that we would perhaps try to stay away from saying in the presence of someone who has lost a loved one, and 10 things that we can maybe say instead that would feel more validating. As always, know that each griever is going to be their own individual experience drivers. Not all of these will work with all people because, again, we're human and we are all individual. So if you hear something and you know in your heart of hearts that it's not going to work for your griever, the griever in your life, great. Then you know that and just let it go. I don't need to be right. I don't need to be 100% right 100% of the time. Like that's just not possible. So that's not a standard that we want to hold anyone to. These are tips and tools and meant to be helpful and supportive. So take what is going to be helpful and supportive and leave the rest. That being said, these can be utilized, shifted, and tweaked for anyone who is going through any form of loss experience. So it might be that someone is recently bereaved. Perhaps someone has recently lost a job, lost a home, been through a divorce, et cetera, et cetera. So any of these could potentially be shifted so that we can better support someone moving through a loss experience. For clarity's sake, and so that I don't drive myself crazy and repeat the same handful of phrases just to ensure that everybody feels seen and validated, just know that's the case. And moving forward, I will be referring to a griever and a loss experience specific to death, just to ensure that I stay consistent from the front of episode to end of episode, not because we can't utilize some of these things in multiple ways. So that being said, someone in your life has recently suffered a loss and you want to reach out. I suggest that the very first step that you take is take a couple of breaths. Ensure that you are emotionally balanced and grounded enough to be able to even reach out and offer said support to the griever. Very oftentimes we get news about a loss and we have our own emotions about it, whether it's because we knew the person also that passed away, and or we have our own feelings about death and loss. And it's very easy to be swept away by those emotions in the presence of the griever that you are attempting to support. So first and foremost, you just want to take a couple of breaths. And if you need support, perhaps you find support within your own support circles so that you can then hold that strong supportive space and not be swayed and not ask the griever to do any kind of emotional labor for you. Meaning you don't want the griever to be comforting you because you are having a very intense emotional experience. Because that griever they don't have it in them, and very, very oftentimes we will, as grievers, we see somebody that's upset and we might try to get ourselves to the point where we can comfort. And that's just, that's not fair, not that life is fair, but, let's not push it. So just take a couple of deep breaths, figure out where you are, make sure that you are emotionally grounded enough to be able to hold that solid support. And I mentioned getting support from your own social or your own support circle. So think about layers of community. So meaning, like, for example, you have an onion, you cut the onion down the middle. In the middle, there's the core, right? And you've got all these different layers moving outward. So if we think about this in terms of the very center of the onion is the griever, is the person that has experienced the loss. So for example's sake, a person has lost a spouse. So the person who lost the spouse is at the very center of that ring. The next ring out from the person that has experienced the loss would be the immediate family and the very, very close friends. So immediate family, very, very close friends. The next ring out would be friends and family. The next ring out from that would be casual friends, colleagues, community members. The next ring out from that is going to be those more casual acquaintances, people within the community that you know, but maybe are not involved very heavily in your social circle. So it might be helpful also to think about where you fall in those rings of support, right? So if, for example, you are on the closer to the outer rings there, so you're farther removed from the center, you're probably not going to show up at the bereaved's house knocking on the door and attempting to offer support, because that's not the kind of relationship that you had prior to this person passing away. Now, just know that a griever is going to, in most cases, be receptive and appreciative of any kind of support. My note to you is this. A griever's life has been absolutely turned upside down. Nothing is the same. They are topsy-turvy. They have no ground to stand on. Everything is wrong. Everything is turned upside down. Nothing is the way that it should be. So to throw another variable at them that feels unnatural and outside of what their regular support structures and their regular connections and relationships feel like on a natural and integral path is one more thing that can be shaking and frustrating or confusing. So we want to ensure that what we're doing, while it comes from a really pure and kind-hearted and authentic, loving place from your own heart, you have to understand that it's not about you, and you don't get to decide what is going to be best for that griever. So the number one worst thing that you can say to a griever is nothing. So this is way worse than saying the wrong thing. Is choosing not to recognize that a loss has occurred. By choosing to ignore a loss, we have communicated to the griever that either we are so uncomfortable with their presence and their emotions that we're going to ignore them and the fact that there was a loss altogether, and or we are communicating to the griever that that loss doesn't mean anything to us. Even if all you can get out is like a crumpled up mumbling of, the other 9 things not to say, that's better than not recognizing that there was a loss altogether. So not saying anything is different than holding strong supportive space, sitting with the griever in sweet silence. That's different. In those kinds of situations, there's usually been some kind of verbal communication leading up to that point, and to be able to hold that kind of strong, supportive, sweet, silent space, you have a really, you're closer in that ring of support to the griever. So instead, maybe we say literally anything, like anything. So you can make note of some of the things that we're going to talk about moving forward, but just remember that any recognition of a loss is better than no recognition at all. So the second thing we should potentially stay away from are sentences that begin with, I know how you feel. No, you don't. No, I guarantee you don't. No. It's even worse when that ... after I know how you feel is followed by something so radically invalidating. Look, pain is pain and grief is grief. Those statements, which I have heard over and over again, both in my own grief experience by people who are really in their kind-hearted way attempting to bridge the gap and connect with me, and also with my clients who are saying that to almost invalidate their own pain and invalidate and speed along the process of healing, when you can't do that without recognizing the kind of pain that you're sitting within. So the human experience might be similar in some ways, but we can never know for sure how somebody else feels. I have very close loved ones, friendships in which that friend lost her husband. I still don't know how she feels. I have a very dear friend who has lost a sibling. While I have lost a sibling, I don't know how that feels, because each relationship is individual and different. And therefore, each grief experience is going to be individual and different. So claiming that we know how someone feels is diminishing of the bereaved's emotions. And it further isolates us. It makes us it may make us feel shut down. And then when we shut down, it makes it even more difficult to connect in ways that allow for us as a griever to feel fully seen and to feel fully understood. Instead, we could maybe try saying, I can't imagine how you feel. So almost flipping that on its head. Recognition of the griever's emotional experience. And here we haven't made it about you, the person that's attempting to give support, right? So in the former, I know how you feel. Well, you just started that. You've centered yourself. This is about you and your feelings and you knowing how I feel based on your own emotional landscape. No, flip that. I can't imagine how you feel. So not only does this validate the fact that we are having our own individual grief experience, it allows us to maybe have the freedom to communicate to you, if we feel comfortable, how it is that we do feel. So that opens up a doorway to allow for us to be a little bit more free and expressive. And again, that might not happen. And if it doesn't, then that's okay. You need to know as a support person that it's not about you, and the griever may eventually open up and they may not. But you have at least created a doorway to allow for the griever to open the door and walk through if they so choose. So how you holding up? Womp womp. Grievers have been conditioned, like this is that societal kind of input, right? To say things like, oh, I'm managing, I'm making it, I'm doing all right. Or, well, I mean, like it sucks, but whatever. So just know that those responses are really for your benefit. You as the support person, we're saying that for you. It is nearly damn impossible for us to answer that question honestly, because the way that the grief experience works, especially in the early acute phases of it, there are so many emotions swirling around and so much that has to actually like task wise also happen. Like there's no way that we can even figure out how to answer that question. There are emotional and physical, like body responses that shift not just day to day and week to week, but like second to second. So, and some of those are absolutely unnameable. We don't have necessarily the words to communicate them. So how you holding up? You'll hear us say, okay, managing, making it. Maybe you are close enough to the griever that you can have a true conversation about how they truly are holding up. Typically, this is the kind of question that you're going to hear from someone that you run into at Target, on a walk, at the grocery store. That is, again, like time and place. So making a safe space for a griever to actually process how they're doing requires that you are within that closer family friend support structure, so closer to one of those inner circular rings, and that the griever is open and willing and able to communicate, and that you as a support person are able to hold strong supportive space to be able to listen to how the griever is actually doing without trying to fix them. This is a really tough conversation to navigate, and it has to start in a place that feels safe and comfortable, and usually a private environment, such as a griever's home, not on the sidewalk or not in an aisle at Target. So if none of those aspects of the support conversation apply, maybe you can assume that they're holding up pretty crappily. Is that a word? It's a word now. In the grief experience, crappily is in fact a word. Instead, maybe we can say something along the lines of, I am so sorry that you're going through this, because the situation sucks. It just straight up sucks. Period. So expressing that you recognize that it sucks and that you regret that they are having to navigate this loss process, it may help the griever to feel held and more fully seen. And you've also given them an unspoken permission to feel whatever it is that might be coming up. And you're doing that by recognizing that it's not an easy path. You're just saying, God, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I'm just so sorry. This next item makes my eyeball twitch, and y'all are just going to have to bear with me. When Clint passed, I had these things printed up on signboards and posted into the ground throughout his celebration of life, because I was so serious about just not wanting to hear it. Side note, also understand that all of the things on here that I'm saying, maybe try to stay away from saying these. Nobody is saying these things maliciously, and I'm not coming at you with judgment and a harshness. I might have that in my tone. I don't. I understand that these things are communicated from a place of mostly love and care. But when you know better, you do better. So, they're in a better place, or everything happens for a reason. No bueno. Do not like. Not a fan. You just told the bereaved that the person that they lost is in a better place, and that they had to die. They had to die to serve a higher purpose for the people that were still living. In the best cases, that comes off feeling kind of icky and invalidating and minimizing. In worst cases, it's just straight up offensive. And unless you are like 10 million% sure that you know the belief system of the griever and the person that they lost, maybe the griever is a devout Christian, but the person that they lost was an atheist. You still can't say that they're in a better place. That still might not fall correctly. It might actually make the griever feel worse, because if they knew the cosmology of the individual that they lost. Anyway, I could go on and side road from this topic forever. So unless you know the belief system of the person, of the griever, probably sidestep, stay away from they're in a better place. Even if you know that they believe in heaven, losing a loved one is so shaking and ungrounding that it might have shaken their faith. And you saying that they are in heaven or in a better place, it could rub a raw wound. So there are things that we can say that might just fall a little bit better. So we'll maybe say instead that you would like to honor the loved one in a specific way. So maybe we choose to dedicate some of your resources, whether that's time or energy, in a way that will honor the deceased, that's fitting to the loved one's desires and interests. And this is going to show the griever that you care about the living legacy of the deceased, that you care that that living legacy moves forward. And if you don't know a cause or action, maybe reach out to somebody that would be an appropriate contact. So probably not the griever. We don't want to ask the griever to do, again, that falls under the umbrella of emotional labor. For example, Clint was very passionate about a couple different international orphanages and donated money to those orphanages in his life. And so there were a handful of friends that knew this about him. So that is where they donated money in his honor to those orphanages, which was so kind and appropriate and just really lovely. And if you don't know, just reach out to someone in the support circle that might have a good referral for you. So another one of my favorites is the at least ... At least you can remarry. At least you didn't have children. Oh, at least he didn't leave too much debt. At least yada yada da blah da blah da blah da blah. This is trash, y'all. No. It's invalidating of the deceased life and the connection that they may have had to the griever. And the deceased is not replaceable. They're not replaceable. You cannot go to Husbands R Us and find the appropriate aisle for the brand of man that you lost and take him home in a cart. Like, the store doesn't exist. I've looked. I've Googled it. It's not there. It's not there. If and when the griever does have someone new in their life, also notable that they're not going to be healed or made better. They will always have the loss of the individual within their life. And maybe the person can have more children, adopt another pet, marry again. That is a separate experience from the one that they shared with the person that they lost. Something that might feel a little bit more supportive is maybe offering the griever the opportunity to share a story about their deceased loved one. So just saying something along the lines of, when you're ready and if you might be open to doing so, I would really love to hear more about your husband, your child, your whomever. And the griever may right then and there feel supported and open enough to share a story. They may, on the flip side, be too emotionally raw to go there. So, you need to, as a support person, be prepared for either reaction and know that it's not about you. Again, it's just about creating that door for the griever so they know that it's there and they can choose to walk through it whenever they feel ready to do so, if they ever feel ready to do so in your presence. But when you're expressing that sincere interest in hearing about the deceased and their life, you're showing that grieving person that you care and that you care about maintaining their memories, which is really validating. And it also gives the griever an opportunity to talk about their loved one and to talk about the life that they shared together, which is really soothing and potentially even healing. So this is something that I have said this, again, this is a when you know better, you do better kind of conversation. Let me know how I can help. Let me know what you need. This is something that we share from our heart. We want to help. We want to support. And often the griever, they don't know what the hell it is that they need, and they don't know how anybody can help because Up is down, down is up. The world is topsy-turvy. Nothing is right. And so everything is so overwhelming that the griever may feel that they are in a mental fog. There are scientific studies that literally prove that the brain of a grieving person is not functioning properly. So we oftentimes don't know what we need, and then we don't know how to articulate what we need. So we also recognize as grievers, and, as potentially even the support person knows this when they're saying it, that this statement is usually like a gateway of escape. So it's like a means to end the conversation and move on, right? So, we've gone through the pleasantries of, hey, how are you doing? How are you holding up? We've already talked about this, probably not best kind of statements to make. And now we've moved on to, oh, well, yeah, I'm doing all right. Well, you just let me know how I can help and what you need, okay? And now you're free to break off and go about your day. Something that would be more helpful is to pinpoint an item that you can do for the griever and just flat out say it. I would like to help you in this way. I would like to drop off a casserole to you on Thursday night at 5:00 for dinner. Will you be home? And is that something that is okay? I can leave it on your doorstep. You don't even have to talk to me. Something like that. Knowing where you fall also in the support circle is really important in this offering. So, if you're within those inner circles, if you're closer to the griever, dropping off those prepared meals, caring for the lawn, maybe doing some laundry or helping with childcare, those things are going to be both helpful, welcome, probably, and appropriate. It's when you start getting into those more outer layers of the support circle that it can get a little dicey. So if you are a casual friend, an acquaintance, a colleague, and you've never before set foot into the griever's home, you've never had a phone conversation with the person, now is probably, again, not the time to show up and knock on the door and start offering hugs and, can I come into your home and do laundry for you? Maybe the griever will say okay, but it probably is not going to feel natural and supportive. It might feel invasive. So just, note where you fall within those support structures. And if you want to do those things, then maybe you connect with someone that is a little bit closer. If you're a colleague, reach out to a very close friend of the griever or a family member of the griever and say, hey, I would love to cook dinner for the family, say like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Can I bring those casseroles and salads and et cetera to you, and you can bring them to the griever? So then that way I'm not within their space. There are ways that you can share your support and whatever kind of support you feel is most authentic to your expression, and still be within the realm of not making the griever additionally uncomfortable. So speaking of not making the griever feel additionally uncomfortable, we want to try to avoid inferring that we understand what the deceased wants for the griever. So making statements such as, they wouldn't want you to feel sad, they wouldn't want you to cry, they wouldn't want you to be upset, they wouldn't want you to call into work, they wouldn't want you to XYZ. That very well could be true. Of course, the deceased is not going to want for the bereaved to be sad, emotional, despondent, cry, drink heavily, etc. But those persons are no longer living. Those people are dead, and their absence is represented in those grievers' actions and emotions. So, first of all, you saying that the deceased wouldn't want XYZ infers that you are speaking for the deceased, that you knew them so well that you can express their thoughts and feelings to the bereaved. So right off the bat, that can feel kind of icky. It can feel frustrating. It can create anger. It can create further isolation. Disallowing any of those emotions equates to asking the griever to no longer or to stop feeling for their deceased loved one. So saying they wouldn't want you to cry It is disallowing those emotions and asking them to stop feeling for their deceased loved one. It may feel more supportive to, in those moments, maybe ask the griever if you can share a story about the deceased. So similarly, asking the griever if they can share stories about their experience. Maybe you could share a story about your experience with the deceased person. So sharing a moment or a story or an item about the deceased person that you carry as a gift in your own heart. And if there's maybe a moment that the deceased made you laugh, or that you remember witnessing in the relationship that the griever shared with the person that passed away, those special moments that you witnessed, maybe giving a voice to those, it's speaking about memories with the griever. It's going to help them to see that the impact of their loved ones was real, and that impact was made, and that they're not going to be forgotten, that there are memories outside of their own brain, and that they have memories inside of families and friendships and communities. It's less isolating. It creates connection. It can very oftentimes create conversation. It can sometimes create some levity. Maybe there's laughter that might result. Laughter and tears very often result. It's a very common both and experience. In your conversations of support, we do want to ensure that we are communicating from a place that is not like singularly you-centered, you as the support person. So statements such as, I wouldn't know what to do if I lost my father, sister, brother, husband, whomever the deceased was. You've now shifted full attention to the relationship that you still have with your living relationship. So now the griever is looking at you, who still has a relationship with your husband, your son, your father, your whomever. So instead of supporting, you've now further isolated the griever. You've created more of a chasm between the two of you. You've highlighted what they've lost and highlighted what you still have. And you're comparing your relationship and its depth and meaning to that of the bereaved. So that and I understand that is not where those statements are coming from. Very oftentimes those statements fall out of our mouths when we haven't done the very first thing that we noted in this podcast, which is check yourself, because check yourself, you go wreck yourself. So if you don't check your own emotional fortitude, this is the kind of shit that comes out of your mouth. Oh, I wouldn't know what to do if I lost my husband. Well, that's not helpful. I do know what to do. I don't know what to do. I was prepared for this. Should I have been prepared for this? It just kind of creates an emotional spiral. And in that emotional spiral, I, as a griever, am getting farther and farther and farther away from you as my support person, when really you were just in your own feelings and talking out of your ass. So there are other things that we can say instead. Such as something as simple as, you are in my thoughts. You are in my thoughts. Letting the griever know that you hold them and their loss solidly within your mind is going to help them feel more connected to you. Because grief, y'all, you just feel you are on an island unto yourself. It is such a solitary experience. It is such an isolating experience that the simple reminder that there are other people in the world and that they are thinking about you can be shattering in a positive way. It can bring you out of that like personal isolation funk. Even if it's just for a second, it's helpful. It's like a little touchstone. Like, oh, okay. This is also something, I mean, you don't have to say this regularly. I remembered getting just random texts throughout any part of the day or night. And it just, again, was a little touchstone. Sending a little text with these very simple words: you're in my thoughts. No need to text back. I love you. Done. It's a nice way to remind the griever that they are not alone and that they have not been forgotten. So this is something that I would encourage you, if you are a close support person, to send, on yearly anniversaries or important holidays that might be rubbing a griever, might be hurting their heart a little bit. I often hear from support people, well, I don't want to remind them. Honey, we remember. You're not reminding us of anything. You're not bringing us down to a new level that we are not familiar with. I guarantee you, if it is an anniversary date of a death, if it is a birthday, if it is an anniversary, if it is a holiday, we are thinking about our loss. We are. You're not reminding us of shit. So what you would be reminding us of is that we're not alone and that we are in your thoughts. And how lovely is that? I mean, it's short, sweet, easy, and it does make a difference. And you know what? Like, you can continue to do that for years. Send those texts for years, because the statement, time heals all wounds, or it just takes time, that's another one that's a whole big old backpack full of BS. Because time passes regardless of what is happening around you. There can be a crack in the sidewalk. You can drop a plate and it shatters. You can stare at that plate for all of the end of days. And it's not going to magically fix itself just because the passage of time. So that statement does not work in reference to the cracks of our heart as well. Time does not heal all wounds. Time changes our wounds, but time alone will not heal them. It's what we as a griever choose to do or choose not to do in some cases that impacts the quality of that wound that we carry. It's what we choose to do with our time as a griever that will help us to heal or help us not to heal. And that's up to us. Totally 100%, that nothing that you can say is going to do that work for us. As a recently bereaved person, something else that I noticed and I have heard from my clients and from grievers the world over, nighttime is kind of tricky. It starts getting dark, and heaven help you if it is the winter time and it starts getting dark and cold earlier and earlier. That dark and cold can kind of highlight our losses. It can highlight our isolation. It can highlight our grief, our aloneness. And maybe sending a late night text or offering the griever the opportunity to either call or text when they need or want to talk in those darker or later hours of the evening may be beneficial. So just saying something or texting or emailing something along the lines of, you know what, I am a night owl, I'm up late, call or text me whenever you might need or want to talk. There would be times that as a support person, I have gotten texts at 2 and 3 in the morning. And I have been absolutely overwhelmed with gratitude that the griever reached out to me, because those are some scary hours and those are some dark and isolating hours. So to be able to offer that support and I also honor the strength that it takes from the griever to pick up the phone and to make that late night phone call or to send that late night text, because it is kind of scary. And sometimes they just need to send it or say it or make the call, and that kind of relieves a little bit of the pressure in the grief pressure valve. So then maybe they can find some rest or sleep or breath, just breath. So the very last thing that I want to touch on, I feel like I have been talking forever, hopefully you're still with me, is the "you're so strong," or gosh, I can't believe you're handling this so well. You're so positive. You're staying so positive. Or I haven't seen you cry. Or different versions of this, like saying don't cry or be strong and stay positive. All of those things are framing the griever in a way that disallows for the spectrum of emotion. The griever will cry, and they will also be strong. They are going to be positive, and they are also going to be despondent in most cases. So we don't want to make statements that are controlling or that are diminishing of the griever and their individual experience. So we just want to allow for them to have their very natural emotional process. And that could include tears. It could include like bouts of deep sadness and guilt and hopelessness, variants of depression. It could be a collection of any kinds of feelings that society has dubbed as quote unquote negative. And by postponing those feelings from being expressed, we are just repressing and asking for those things to be repressed. And they're going to manifest in different ways. They're going to come out as physical body pain, rage bouts. It could be they manifest as addiction, drinking, alcoholism, or, any variety of other unhealthy or less than healthy coping mechanisms, actions, and feelings. So there's nothing wrong with recognizing someone's strength, saying, oh my gosh, you're so strong. And know that that person probably doesn't feel that way. And if they do feel that way and act that way and are that way, they weren't really given a choice. So allowing for them, or creating, again, that doorway for them to walk through in any way, shape, or form that they are from moment to moment, is really helpful. Whoa, okay, so that was kind of a lot. If you hung with me throughout the entirety of this podcast, I appreciate you. And hopefully you found some kind of insight, and potentially as a support person, you are better armed to hold strong, supportive, sweet space for the recently bereaved. And if you are a recently bereaved person, hopefully you feel a little bit more seen and understood and held, and just know that we're all doing the best that we can, and we're trying to learn and know better so that we can be better. Thanks so much, y'all, and I'll see you next time. You guys, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I so appreciate you. If you've enjoyed any part of this podcast, I would also really appreciate a quick review, or maybe share the podcast with someone else in your life that you think might also find value in it. If you've got ideas for things you want me to tackle in future episodes, or if you just want to share a little bit more about your own story, you can find me on Instagram at khhealingarts, or you can reach out to me via my webpage. It's khhealingarts.com. I'd love to continue this conversation and get to know you a little bit better. And as always, please know that you are loved, appreciated, and that I hope you are well in all of your wanderings. Yeah, I know that's corny. Doesn't make it less true.